5 years ago, I stood in the bridal suite of this exact venue, in a different white dress, waiting for a man who never showed up. He left me at the altar, a spectacle of public humiliation for 200 guests, because he was ashamed to have a fat wife. Today, I'm the bride again, in the same venue, marrying the love of my life. And the man who was just sent over to refill our champagne, the man with the trembling hands and the haunted familiar eyes, that's him. He won. Hi everyone. For those of you who are new to our community, welcome. My name is Mia. I'm 30 years old, and the story you are about to hear is the one I had to live through to become the woman you see today. I am a business owner, a wife, and a woman who finally understands her own worth. But that understanding was forged in the absolute hottest, most humiliating fire imaginable. This is the story I thought I would take to my grave. Seriously, to be a jilted bride is a special kind of nightmare. But to be the fat jilted bride? Oh my gosh, it's a category of shame all its own. You're not just an object of pity, you're a cautionary tale. You're the living embodiment of every fear a woman has ever had. That your body makes you unlovable, that you are not worthy of a public commitment, that you are, in the end, disposable. The whispers, the stares, the frantic calls from relatives. It's a public stoning of your self-esteem. For a long time, I believed I deserved it. I believed his cowardly act was a justified reaction to my flawed body. I internalized the shame so deeply that it became the lens through which I saw the world. I looked in the mirror and saw the girl who was left at the altar. I went on dates and saw myself through my date's eyes, wondering if they saw it too. You start asking yourself the most soul-destroying questions. Just because I'm fat, do I deserve to be humiliated in front of everyone I've ever known? Did my body give him the right to turn my dream day into my life's most traumatic event? Am I fundamentally unworthy of being a wife? And for years, the answer that echoed back was a resounding, shameful yes. But this is not a sob story. This is a comeback story. This is the story of what happens when you are pushed off a cliff, and instead of falling, you discover you have wings. It's about the moment I realized that the venue wasn't the tomb of my happiness, it was the construction site of my new life. It's about how I stopped trying to make my body smaller for a man and started making my life bigger for myself. This is the story of how I took the most humiliating day of my life and turned it into the foundation of an empire. The journey was 5 years long. It was a marathon of healing, of learning, of building. It was fought in lonely apartments, in late-night college classes, and in the high-stakes world of business pitches. There were so many setbacks, so many moments of crippling self-doubt where the ghost of that empty altar threatened to swallow me whole. But the fire that was lit in me that day, the fire of pure, righteous, humiliated rage, was a fire that could not be extinguished. I know, with absolute certainty, that someone watching this right now is nursing the wound of a deep, personal betrayal. You feel like your story ended on its most painful chapter. I see you. I was you. And I'm telling you this story so you know, with every fiber of your being, that you get to write the next chapter. And you can make it a masterpiece. Before we travel back 5 years, to the day my life was supposed to begin, and instead came to a screeching halt, I need to ask you for your support. If this story is already striking a chord with you, please take a second to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Every subscription is a hand reaching out in the dark, a vote of confidence that gives me the courage to walk back into that bridal suite and tell you exactly how it all went down. Okay, let's go back. Let's go back to a girl who was about to learn that happily ever after can be a very cruel lie. My story with Alex begins, as most tragedies do, with a beautiful, intoxicating lie. We met 7 years ago, when I was 23. I was working as an administrative assistant at a small interior design firm, a job I liked but didn't love. My life was nice. It was comfortable. I had a small circle of good friends, a cozy apartment, and a deep, abiding passion for creating warmth and comfort, both in my home and through my cooking. I've always been a fat girl. It's been a constant in my life. It wasn't born of trauma or sadness, but of joy. My family shows love with food. My childhood home was a place of abundance, of second helpings, of the belief that a full belly meant a happy heart, and I carried that into my own life. I found solace and creativity in the kitchen. For me, being fat was just a byproduct of a life filled with flavor and love. It was a part of me, a part I had a complicated but mostly peaceful relationship with. I met Alex at a friend's barbecue. He was a financial advisor, and he was the total package. Tall, conventionally handsome, with an easy, confident charm that drew people to him like moths to a flame. I was in my usual corner, making sure everyone had a plate, when he struck up a conversation. He didn't talk to me with that polite, slightly strained air that handsome men sometimes use with fat girls. He seemed genuinely interested. He asked about my job, about my passion for design. He made me laugh. By the end of the night, he asked for my number. I was so shocked I almost dropped my plate. Our relationship was a fairy tale. Alex seemed to love everything about me. He loved my nurturing side. He raved about my cooking. He told me he loved my curves, that he preferred a real woman to the skinny girls he used to date. "You're so comfortable in your own skin, Mia," he'd say. And I believed him. I didn't realize he was projecting a fantasy onto me. I didn't see that his love for my comfort was actually a love for the control it gave him. With me, the sweet, non-threatening fat girlfriend, he always got to be the handsome, successful, desirable one in the relationship. It fed his ego. Our life together was a picture of domestic bliss. We moved in together after a year. Our apartment became our castle, a place I filled with warmth and delicious food. I loved taking care of him, of our home. I saw it as my role. He was the ambitious provider, and I was the nurturing heart of our life together. It was a traditional, almost old-fashioned dynamic, but it felt right. It felt safe. His family was another story. They were polite to me, but there was a distinct, chilly undercurrent of disapproval. His mother, in particular, was a woman who valued appearances above all else. His younger sister, Chloe, was her masterpiece, a thin, perfect, immaculately dressed woman who was married to an equally perfect doctor. I was an anomaly at their family gatherings, a comfortable, oversized armchair, in a room full of sleek, minimalist furniture. They never said anything overtly cruel, but the judgment was in their eyes, in the way they'd offer me a tiny sliver of dessert, in the way they'd praise Chloe's discipline in front of me. Alex always defended me, brushing off their subtle digs, and I loved him all the more for it. I saw him as my protector, my champion. I didn't realize he was just protecting his own choice, not my feelings. And now, for the key supporter, the person who planted a seed that would, 5 years later, grow into my salvation. Her name was Margaret, and she was the owner and manager of the Willows, the most beautiful wedding venue in the region. When Alex and I got engaged, the Willows was my dream venue. It was a beautifully restored 19th century barn with soaring ceilings, crystal chandeliers, and a view of the rolling hills that was pure magic. It was also wildly popular and notoriously difficult to book. We went for a tour, and I was instantly enchanted. Margaret, a warm, elegant woman in her 60s with a kind smile and sharp, intelligent eyes, gave us the tour herself. I was a nervous wreck. I was a fat girl trying to book a fairy tale venue, and I was sure she would be judging me, wondering what a handsome man like Alex was doing with someone like me. But she wasn't. She treated me with a deep, profound respect that was startling. As we walked through the space, I started talking about my vision for the wedding, not just the colors, but the feeling I wanted to create, a sense of intimate, joyful, abundant celebration. I talked about my ideas for the lighting, for the flow of the space, for creating cozy little conversation nooks. Alex was just nodding along, but Margaret stopped and looked at me. "You have a designer's eye, my dear," she said, her voice filled with genuine appreciation. "You don't just see a room, you see the story that can be told within it. It's a rare gift." Her compliment was so specific, so professional, that it caught me off guard. It was like she had looked past my body and seen my brain, the part of me that I secretly valued but rarely showed to the world. We talked for an hour, not just about the wedding, but about event design, about the psychology of space. She listened to me with a focused intensity that made me feel seen and respected in a way I hadn't felt in years. By the end of the meeting, I was sure there was no way we could get a date. But Margaret went to her office and came back with a smile. "I had a cancellation for a Saturday next October," she said. "It's yours if you want it." She gave me a little wink. "I have a feeling your wedding is going to be one for the books." That day, I was floating. Not just because we got the venue, but because of Margaret. She had treated me like a peer, like a professional. She had validated a part of me that had nothing to do with my body or my relationship with Alex. She had planted a tiny, forgotten seed of my own professional potential. Alex proposed after 2 years, and we set the date at the Willows for the following October. The first year of our engagement was blissful. It was only in the final 6 months that the cracks began to show. The closer we got to the wedding, the more Alex's anxiety seemed to grow. His family's subtle pressure became more overt. "Have you found a dress yet, Mia?" his mother would ask every week. "You must be working so hard to get in shape for it." Alex started to echo their concerns, always framing it as love. "I just want you to feel amazing on our big day," he'd say, as he'd suggest we skip dessert. "I want you to look back at the photos and have no regrets." But his words felt less like support and more like a threat. The unspoken part was clear. "I will have regrets if you don't lose weight." My dream of our wedding day, of a joyful, abundant celebration, was slowly being whittled down, replaced by a single terrifying goal: to be a thin bride. I was no longer planning a marriage. I was desperately trying to become a woman I thought my fiancé could be proud of, walking step by painful step toward a day that was supposed to be my greatest joy, but was quickly becoming my greatest fear. The final few months before the wedding were a masterclass in smiling through suffocation. On the surface, everything was perfect. The RSVPs were rolling in. The floral arrangements were confirmed. My dress, a beautiful romantic gown that I loved but was now terrified of, was in its final stages of alterations. But underneath the placid surface of wedding planning, a frantic, desperate current of anxiety was pulling me under. Alex's anxiety had metastasized, infecting every corner of our life. Our home was no longer a sanctuary, it was a boot camp. He had hired a personal trainer for me, a relentlessly cheerful woman who would put me through grueling workouts that left my body aching and my spirit bruised. He cleaned out our pantry, replacing the pasta and rice with quinoa and protein powder. "Teamwork makes the dream work," he'd say with a bright, false smile, as if we were training for the Olympics and not our own marriage. My body became the central topic of every conversation. He'd praise a 2-pound weight loss with the same fervor he once praised my cooking. He'd eye a piece of bread on my plate at a restaurant with a look of quiet, disappointed betrayal. His love had become transactional, a reward for my compliance, withheld for my failures. I was constantly walking on eggshells, my worth measured daily on the bathroom scale. The lowest point came during the final dress fitting, 3 weeks before the wedding. I had been starving myself for days, and the dress, which had been uncomfortably snug, finally zipped up. I stood in front of the mirror, looking at my reflection. I was thinner, yes, but I looked haunted. There were dark circles under my eyes, and my smile was a tight, strained grimace. I didn't see a happy bride. I saw a prisoner in a white satin jail. But Alex saw something else. He was there with me, and when he saw the dress zipped, a look of profound, genuine relief washed over his face. "There she is," he breathed, his eyes shining. "There's my beautiful bride." He hugged me, and for the first time in months, his affection felt real. But it wasn't for me. It was for the thinner, more acceptable version of me he saw in the mirror. His relief was a knife in my heart, because it confirmed my deepest fear. He had been ashamed of me all along. His love was entirely conditional on my size. The week of the wedding was a surreal, out-of-body experience. Friends and family began to arrive from out of town, their faces beaming with excitement. Our apartment was filled with flowers, cards, and joyful chaos. I felt like an actress playing the part of a happy bride. My smile a mask, my laughter a hollow echo. Every congratulatory hug felt like a lie. Alex, now that the problem of my body had been sufficiently managed, was back to his old charming self. He was attentive, affectionate, the perfect fiancé. He was proud of his project, proud of the results. He paraded me around at the rehearsal dinner, like a trophy he had won. "Doesn't she look incredible?" he'd say to our guests. "She worked so hard." And I would just smile, a silent scream trapped behind my teeth. The night before the wedding, I couldn't sleep. I lay in our bed, staring at the ceiling, a knot of pure, icy dread in my stomach. Alex was sleeping peacefully beside me, his breathing deep and even. He had no doubts. Why would he? He was getting everything he wanted. The perfect venue, the perfect party, and now, the acceptably sized wife. I, on the other hand, felt like I was on the verge of walking to my own execution. I was about to commit my entire life to a man whose love was a currency I had to earn every single day. The thought was suffocating. But what could I do? 200 guests were in town. My parents had spent their life savings on this day. My dress was hanging in the closet. To back out now would be unthinkable, a scandal, another form of public humiliation. I was trapped. I had no choice but to walk down that aisle and play my part. The morning of the wedding was a flurry of forced festivity. My bridesmaids, bless their hearts, were a whirlwind of champagne, hairspray, and cheerful chatter in the bridal suite at the Willows. The suite was beautiful, a rustic, elegant space filled with light. But to me, it felt like a holding cell. I sat in front of the mirror, a blank doll, as the makeup artist painted a happy bride's face onto my own. "You're so calm," my maid of honor Sarah said, squeezing my shoulder. I was a basket case on my wedding day. I just smiled. It wasn't calm. It was shock. My soul had disconnected from my body, a defense mechanism against the impending trauma. Around noon, an hour before the ceremony was set to begin, the text messages started. Not to my phone, but to my bridesmaids' phones. I saw them huddled in a corner, whispering, their faces pale, casting worried glances in my direction. "What is it?" I asked, my voice flat. The knot of dread in my stomach tightened. Sarah walked over to me, her own face a mask of disbelief and fury. It's Alex Groomsman," she stammered. "They're saying they can't find him." My blood ran cold. "He's just running late," I told myself. "He got cold feet, but he'll be here. He has to be here. Hell." But the minutes ticked by, each one a slow, torturous drop of water on my forehead. 10 minutes. 20. The wedding planner was starting to pace. My mother came into the suite, her face a frantic, smiling mask of denial. "Traffic must be terrible," she said, her voice a little too high. 30 minutes past the start time. The guests were all seated. The string quartet in the barn had started playing the same gentle prelude, on a loop, the beautiful melody slowly turning into a funeral dirge. The whispers from the hallway grew louder. My father came to the door, his face ashen. "His phone is going straight to voicemail," he said, his voice a low, horrified whisper. "His parents don't know where he is. They said he left the hotel this morning, fully dressed in his tux, and just disappeared." And that's when I knew he wasn't coming. The realization didn't hit me like a wave. It hit me like a bullet. A clean, sharp, fatal shot, right through the heart. He had run. He had looked at the finish line, at a lifetime with me, and he had turned and fled in the opposite direction. The next few moments are a chaotic, mercifully blurry memory. My mother started to cry. My bridesmaids were making frantic, useless phone calls. The wedding planner was trying to talk about contingency plans. And then, a text message came through. To my phone. It was from Alex. A single, cowardly, soul-destroying text message. I read it, my hands shaking so badly. The screen was a blur. I'm so sorry, Mia. I can't do this. I thought I could, but I can't. I don't want this life. It's not you, it's me. I'm a coward. Please just don't hate me. It's not you, it's me. The most pathetic, insulting cliché in the history of breakups. He didn't even have the courage to tell me the truth. He didn't have the decency to say, I can't marry you because you're fat, and my family disapproves, and I am a weak, superficial man who cares more about appearances than I do about you. He just ran, leaving me to face the fallout, the shame, the 200 pairs of pitying eyes sitting in that barn. The pain was so immense, so all-consuming, that it was almost transcendent. It was a physical thing. I felt my lungs seize, my vision tunnel. The beautiful, expensive dress I was wearing suddenly felt like a lead-lined coffin. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. Me. I saw the perfectly coiffed hair, the flawless makeup, the radiant white dress. And I saw the face of a fool. A pathetic fat fool who had starved herself and contorted her soul for a man who had just thrown her away like a piece of trash on the most important day of her life, in the most public way imaginable. And then, something inside me snapped. The shock, the grief, the pain, it all coalesced and then combusted, turning into a strange, icy, diamond-hard calm. The bride was dead. The victim was dead. And in her place, a woman I didn't recognize was born. I turned to my father, who was standing in the doorway, his face a mask of helpless agony. Dad, I said, my voice eerily steady. You need to go out there. You need to go to the barn and make an announcement. Mia, honey, what do I say? He choked out. You tell them the truth, I said, my voice gaining a cold, hard strength with every word. You tell them that the wedding is off. You tell them the groom is not coming. And then you tell them that my parents and I have paid a lot of money for this beautiful venue, and all this wonderful food and drink, and that the party is still on. You tell them that today is not a wedding. It is a celebration of a new beginning. My new beginning. My mother gasped. Mia, you can't be serious. I have never been more serious in my life, I said, looking at my own strange, determined face in the mirror. I started to unbutton the back of my wedding dress. I am not going to hide in this room. I am not going to let him turn me into a victim. He wanted a public spectacle? He's going to get one. But it's not going to be the one he imagined. I stepped out of the wedding dress and let it fall to the floor in a heap of white satin and shattered dreams. I stood there for a moment in my slip. Then I walked to the closet where my bridesmaids had hung their dresses. I pulled out my maid of honor's dress. A simple, elegant cocktail dress in a deep, powerful shade of sapphire blue. Sarah, I said, my voice a command. Help me into this. She just stared at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of horror and awe. Then she nodded, a slow, determined smile spreading across her face. You got it, boss, she whispered. 10 minutes later, I walked out of that bridal suite. I was not wearing white. I was wearing the sapphire blue dress. My hair was still up, my makeup was still flawless. I walked down the hallway, past the stunned faces of the venue staff, and I walked to the entrance of the barn. I heard my father's voice, amplified by the microphone, his words trembling but clear, just as I had instructed. I heard the collective, shocked gasp of 200 people. And then I heard him say, "And now, please join me in celebrating the strongest woman I have ever known. My daughter Mia, Mr." And I walked into that barn. I walked into my own wedding reception, alone. The string quartet, bless their professional hearts seeing me, immediately switched from the sad prelude to a powerful, defiant piece of music. I walked down the aisle I was supposed to walk down to meet my husband, and I walked right up to the beautiful, flower-decked altar. I looked out at the sea of faces, my friends, my family, his friends, his family. Their faces were a kaleidoscope of shock, pity, confusion, and a dawning, incredible respect. I took the microphone from my father's trembling hand. "Hi, everyone," I said, my voice ringing out, clear and steady and strong. "So, this is a little awkward." A few nervous laughs rippled through the crowd. "As my father said, the wedding is off," I continued. "It seems my fiancé has had a change of heart, and I wish him well. But I'm standing here, in this beautiful place, surrounded by people I love. And I am not going to let this day be defined by one man's cowardice. I am going to let it be defined by my own strength." I raised my chin. "So there will be no wedding today. But there will be a party. We are going to eat the delicious food, we are going to drink the expensive champagne, and we are going to dance. We are going to celebrate courage and resilience, and the beginning of my brand new, incredible life. The bar is open. Thank you." For a moment there was a stunned silence, and then the entire room erupted. It was a roar. A standing ovation so loud, so powerful, so filled with love and support that it was a physical force. It washed over me, a tidal wave of affirmation, erasing the shame, extinguishing the humiliation. In that moment, standing on my own altar, I was not the fat girl who was left behind. I was a warrior. I was a queen. And this was my coronation. That party, my unwedding party, was the most surreal and liberating experience of my life. After the initial shock wore off, a strange, beautiful, defiant joy filled that barn. My friends and family, seeing my strength, rallied around me with a ferocity that was breathtaking. We ate the gourmet food, we drank all the champagne, and we danced for hours. I danced with my father, my uncles, my cousins, my friends. I was surrounded by a fortress of love that Alex, in his cowardice, could never penetrate. His family, of course, had scurried away in shame after my speech, his mother casting one last horrified look at me, as if I were a monster who had just broken free of her chains. Good riddance. That night was not a magic wand. It didn't instantly heal the gaping, bleeding wound in my soul, but it was a powerful first step. It was a declaration of war, not against Alex, but against the shame he had tried to saddle me with. I had taken his ultimate act of humiliation, and I had refused to be humiliated. I had taken control of the narrative. The awakening, for me, had happened in that bridal suite. The moment I decided to walk out in that blue dress was the moment the old Mia died and the new one was born. My counterattack, however, was not going to be a quick, fiery act of revenge. It was going to be a long, slow, and meticulously planned siege. My goal was not to destroy him. He was already destroying himself with his own weakness. My goal was to build an empire on the very ground where he had tried to bury me. The war began the day after the party, in the harsh grey light of a hangover and a new reality. Front 1, the logistics. I had to deal with the messy, painful debris of a cancelled life. Front 2, the education. I needed to reforge myself, to turn my innate talents into professional skills. Front 3, the empire. This was the long game. The ultimate, poetic, full-circle victory. The logistics were brutal. I moved out of our apartment within a week, leaving his things in neatly labeled boxes. I didn't want anything that was contaminated by his memory. I moved into a small, sterile, temporary apartment that felt like a monk's cell. It was perfect. I needed the blank slate. I dealt with the returned wedding gifts, writing hundreds of thank you notes for gifts I would never use with a man I no longer knew. Each note was a tiny act of closing a door. Alex tried to contact me, of course. A series of pathetic, self-serving texts and voicemails, filled with apologies that were all about him. "I'm so sorry for the pain I'm in. I don't know what came over me. You were so strong, you made me look so weak." I never responded. I blocked his number. I blocked his family. I blocked his friends. I performed a digital amputation. He was a phantom limb, and I needed to stop feeling the ache. Once the logistical dust had settled, the real work began. I looked at my life. I had a dead-end admin job, a broken heart, and a mountain of shame. But I also had one other thing: the memory of that day at the Willows, the memory of Margaret looking at me with professional respect and saying, "You have a designer's eye." Her words became my North Star. My passion had always been creating spaces that told a story, that made people feel joyful and celebrated. And I had just, in the most traumatic way imaginable, successfully managed the ultimate crisis event. I had turned a disaster into a celebration. A flicker of an idea, insane and audacious, began to spark in my mind. I enrolled in night school, taking classes in event management, hospitality, and business administration. My days were a grueling routine. I'd work my boring 9-to-5 job, then head straight to the community college, often not getting home until after 10 p.m. and I'd eat a quick, lonely dinner and then study until I couldn't keep my eyes open. My weekends, once filled with wedding planning and brunches, were now spent in the library. It was a lonely, exhausting existence. The ghosts were always with me, especially in the quiet moments. The memory of standing in that dress, of the text message, of his family's pitying eyes. There were nights I would be so overwhelmed with grief and self-doubt that I would just curl up in a ball and cry. But then morning would come, and the fire, the anger, the sheer, stubborn refusal to be a victim would get me out of bed. I was a warrior now, and my education was my training ground. The struggles were real and constant. I was broke, pouring every spare dollar into my tuition. I was an outsider in my classes, an almost 30-year-old woman sitting next to teenagers. I felt old, and I felt like a failure. But I was also hungrier than any of them. I soaked up every piece of information like a sponge. I learned about budgeting, about vendor negotiation, about marketing, about the intricate, unglamorous logistics that go into creating a flawless event. I needed experience. So I started at the bottom. I took a weekend job working for a catering company. I spent my Saturdays and Sundays hauling crates, polishing silverware, and serving hors d'oeuvres at other people's perfect weddings. It was excruciating. Every happy couple, every first dance, was a knife in my heart. But I treated it like a boot camp. I wasn't there as a guest. I was there as a student. I watched everything. I saw what worked and what didn't. I saw the moments of chaos behind the scenes, the near disasters that were averted by a calm, competent manager. I was learning. My big break came after about 2 years of this grueling double life. I saw a job posting online. Assistant event coordinator at the Willows. My heart stopped. It felt like fate. It felt terrifying. The thought of going back there, to the scene of my greatest trauma, was nauseating. But it was also the opportunity of a lifetime. The old Mia would have run. The new Mia took a deep breath, polished her resume, and sent in her application. Margaret remembered me. When I walked into her office for the interview, a flicker of recognition, and then a deep, empathetic sadness crossed her face. "Mia," she said, her voice soft. "I was so sorry to hear what happened, and I was so impressed by what you did that day. I've been telling the story of the unwedding party for years. a legend in the industry. We barely talked about my resume. We talked about my vision. We talked about my passion for creating experiences. I told her about my classes, about my work with the catering company. I didn't tell her the whole story of why I was doing this, but she was smart. She saw the fire in my eyes. She understood. She hired me on the spot. Working at the Willows was both the hardest and the most healing thing I could have possibly done. The first few months were a constant battle against my own trauma. Every time I walked into the bridal suite, my heart would pound, my hands would get clammy. Every time I stood in the barn where the altar had been, I could almost hear the echo of my own defiant speech. The ghosts were everywhere, but Margaret was an incredible mentor. She was tough, demanding, and brilliant. She taught me the business from the ground up. I learned how to manage a staff, how to soothe the hysterical mother of the bride, how to solve a logistical nightmare an hour before the guests arrive. And slowly, painstakingly, I began to rewrite my own history with the venue. My body was changing too, not through diet and exercise, but through the sheer physicality of the job. I was on my feet for 12 hours a day, holding tables, climbing ladders to adjust lighting, running from one end of the property to the other. The soft, apologetic body of my past was being replaced by a strong, capable, powerful body, honed by hard work. The ghosts began to fade. The bridal suite was no longer my holding cell, it was my command center. The barn was no longer the site of my humiliation. It was my canvas, a place where I helped create the happiest day of other people's lives. And with every successful wedding I managed, with every tearful, grateful thank you from a happy couple, I was healing. I was taking the most painful place in my memory, and I was transforming it, for myself and for others, into a place of pure joy. For 3 years, I climbed. I went from assistant coordinator to lead coordinator. When Margaret decided to partially retire and step back from the day-to-day operations, she promoted me to general manager. I was running the Willows, my dream venue, my former battleground. It was now my kingdom. I had built my empire. I was successful, I was respected, I was financially independent. I had even started dating again, cautiously at first. But I eventually met a wonderful man, a kind, funny architect who fell in love with me for my strength, my passion, and my mind, not for the size of my dress. After a year together, he proposed. A quiet, heartfelt proposal in the home we had just bought together. And this time, there were no doubts. There were no conditions. There was only the quiet, steady joy of a partnership built on a foundation of mutual respect. And I knew exactly where I wanted to get married. Planning my own wedding, for the second time, was a completely different experience. There was no anxiety, no pressure, no desperate need to please anyone. It was just pure, unadulterated joy. My fiancé, Daniel, was my true partner in every sense of the word. He cared about the texture of the napkins and the flavor of the cake, not because of how it would look to others, but because he wanted our guests to feel a sense of profound warmth and celebration. He was in love with me, the smart, strong, still plus-size but don't give a damn me, and he wanted our wedding to be a reflection of the joyful, abundant life we were building together. And the venue, of course, was the Willows. It was my home turf, my kingdom. I knew every corner, every secret, every logistical challenge. Designing my own wedding in that space felt like the ultimate act of reclamation. It was like I was taking the last, most stubborn ghost of my past and lovingly, firmly showing it the door. I didn't go to a traditional bridal shop for my dress. The thought still left a bitter taste in my mouth. Instead, I hired a young, brilliant local designer, a woman I had discovered through my work, and together, we designed my gown from scratch. It was a masterpiece of confidence. It wasn't a forgiving line or a dress designed to make me look smaller. It was a stunning, form-fitting gown of heavy, luxurious crepe silk with a dramatic, low-cut back and intricate hand-sewn beading that traced the curves of my hips and waist. It was a dress that didn't hide my body, it celebrated it. It was a dress that said, "Here I am, all of me." The day of the wedding was the polar opposite of that other day, 5 years ago. I woke up filled, not with dread, but with a deep calm and profound happiness. The bridal suite at the Willows, once my holding cell, was now a sanctuary filled with my best friends, my loving mother, and the happy buzz of genuine celebration. There were no frantic whispering phone calls, no faces filled with pity. There was only love. As I was getting my makeup done, Margaret, the owner of the Willows and my mentor, came into the suite. She was holding a small velvet box. "I have something for you," she said, her eyes twinkling. She opened the box. Inside was a beautiful, vintage sapphire brooch. "It was my mother's," she said softly. "It's old, and it's blue, and I think the strongest woman I know deserves to wear it today." Tears sprang to my eyes. She had been more than a boss. She had been the fairy godmother I never knew I needed. She had seen my potential when I was a broken, jilted bride, and she had given me a chance to rebuild myself. The ceremony was magic. I walked down that same aisle in that same barn, but this time it was not an act of defiance. It was a walk of pure joy. I saw Daniel waiting for me at the altar, his face shining with a love so open, so unconditional, it took my breath away. We said our vows we had written ourselves, and we were surrounded by the joyful, tearful faces of everyone we loved. The ghosts were gone. The space was filled with nothing but love. The reception was the party I had always dreamed of. The food was spectacular. The champagne flowed freely, and the dance floor was packed. I felt radiant, powerful, and so completely, utterly happy. I was floating. It was about 2 hours into the reception. I was standing with Daniel laughing, when one of the catering captains, a woman I knew well, approached me with a worried look on her face. "Mia," she whispered, leaning in. "We have a problem. One of the new agency waiters, he just dropped an entire tray of champagne flutes. He's a complete wreck. Shaking. I think I need to send him home." I sighed. Even on my wedding day, I was the manager. "It's okay, Susan," I said. "Don't send him home. The agency will charge us for the full shift anyway. Just put him on buzzing duty in the back section where he can't do any more damage. I'll have a quiet word with him later." "Are you sure?" she asked. "It's your wedding, I'm sure," I said with a smile. "I've handled worse." I didn't think about it again for another hour. Daniel and I were making our way through the tables, greeting our guests. We were approaching the back corner of the room when I saw him. A waiter, his back to me, was clumsily clearing plates from a table, his movements jerky and uncertain. He was wearing the standard issue black uniform, but there was something about the slope of his shoulders, the shape of his head, that was horribly, sickeningly familiar. My heart stopped. The happy buzz of the party faded to a dull roar in my ears. It couldn't be. It was impossible. It was a cruel joke of the universe. Daniel, sensing my sudden stillness, put his arm around me. "Mia, honey, are you okay?" I couldn't speak. I just walked forward, as if pulled by an invisible string. "Excuse me," I said, my voice a strange, tight whisper. The waiter turned around, and my world stood still. It was Alex. He was a ghost. A ghost in a cheap, ill-fitting waiter's uniform. The 5 years had not been kind to him. The confident, golden boy charm was gone, replaced by the dull, defeated look of a man who had been beaten down by life. He was thinner, but it was the thinness of stress, not health. His face was pale and unshaven. His eyes were hollow and haunted. He looked at me, and at first, there was no recognition. He just saw the bride, the happy, radiant bride, the boss who was about to reprimand him for his clumsiness. And then, his eyes focused. He saw my face. He saw the sapphire brooch, and a wave of pure, unadulterated shock and horror washed over him. His mouth fell open. The dirty plate in his hand trembled, threatening to fall. "Mia?" he breathed, the name a ghost of a sound. Oh my God, it's you. I just stared at him, my mind a whirlwind of 1,000 conflicting emotions. The irony was so thick, so profound, it was almost suffocating. The man who had left me at this very altar because he was ashamed of me, because I wasn't good enough for his perfect life, was now here, on my real wedding day, bussing my dirty plates, waiting on my guests. Daniel stepped forward, his hand resting protectively on my back. Mia, who is this? Before I could answer, Alex spoke, his voice a desperate, pleading whisper. I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know it was your wedding. The agency just sent me. I just picked up the shift. I needed the money. He looked from my radiant, happy face to my handsome, loving husband, and then around at the beautiful, joyful party, the very party that should have been his, and his face just crumpled. It was the face of a man who was seeing, in real time, the full, catastrophic scope of his own life's greatest mistake. I'm so sorry, he choked out, tears welling in his haunted eyes. For everything. Nani? One thing I so, me cannot and harshly Georgia. And in that moment, looking at this broken, pathetic man in his waiter's uniform, I felt the last, final piece of my old wound heal over. The anger was gone. The hurt was a distant echo. All I felt was a vast, profound, and utterly liberating indifference. He wasn't a monster anymore. He wasn't the villain of my story. He was just a sad, cautionary tale. A man who had valued the opinions of others over the love of a good woman, and had lost everything as a result. His presence here at my wedding was not a curse. It was a gift. It was the universe showing me, in the most undeniable way possible, that I had not just survived. I had won. I looked at him, and for the first time, I felt a flicker of pity. Not for the man he was, but for the man he could have been. I gave him a small, serene smile. The smile of a queen, looking at a ghost. It's all right, Alex, I said, and my voice was genuinely kind. It was a long time ago. I turned to my husband, my new, wonderful husband, and I looped my arm through his. Daniel, this is Alex. He's an old friend. I looked back at Alex one last time. Congratulations on your new job, I said softly. Now, if you'll excuse us, my husband and I have some dancing to do. And with that, I turned my back on him for the final time. I let Daniel lead me away, back to the dance floor, back to the light, back to my real beautiful hard-won life. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The story was finally, completely over. Standing on the dance floor, wrapped in my husband's arms, surrounded by the people I loved, in the venue that I had transformed from a place of trauma into a place of triumph, I finally understood. The most powerful revenge is not about seeing the other person fail. It's about building a life so full of your own success, your own joy, and your own love, that their story no longer has any space to exist within yours. Being fat is not a sin. Letting someone else's fear, someone else's weakness, someone else's shame dictate the course of your life, that is the sin. To anyone watching, to anyone who has ever had their heart broken on their own personal altar, listen to me. That is not your ending. That is your groundbreaking ceremony. That is the moment you are handed the blueprints to build a life that is stronger, more beautiful, and more authentically yours than anything you could have ever imagined. Go and build it. I never spoke to Alex again after that night. I heard from the catering captain that he finished his shift, silently, his eyes on the floor, and then disappeared. His presence at my wedding was a strange, bizarre, and ultimately perfect final chapter to a book I had closed long ago. It was a final, unexpected gift from the universe, a tangible symbol of just how far I had come. My life now is a testament to the fact that you can build a palace on the ruins of your past. Daniel and I are disgustingly happy. Our home is filled with laughter, with partnership, and yes, with delicious food that we cook and enjoy together, without an ounce of shame. And my career? Well, my wedding didn't just give me a husband. It gave me a new business. After our wedding, so many of our guests were blown away by the event I had designed. Margaret, my mentor, pulled me aside and told me, "Mia, you have a gift. It's time to stop just running my venue and start building your own brand." So, with her blessing and investment, I did. I launched Mia and Company Events, my own high-end event planning and design firm. The Willows is my home base, but now I get to tell stories and create magic in venues all over the country. My greatest trauma became my greatest credential. My unwedding party became my legendary calling card. I took the ugliest day of my life and turned it into my life's beautiful work. Sharing this story with you, the whole story, from the bridal suite to the altar, to that final unbelievable moment on the dance floor. It feels like closing the cover of a very long, very intense book. For years I was ashamed of being the jilted bride. But now, telling it to you, here, in our safe and powerful community, I feel nothing but pride. Pride in the woman who stood up in that barn. Pride in the woman who spent 5 years rebuilding. You all, by listening with such open hearts, have taken my greatest shame and helped me see it for what it truly is. My greatest strength. And that is why I need you to add your voice to this incredible community. If this story of turning a nightmare into a triumph resonated with you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to hit that notification bell, because our stories are a continuous source of strength for one another. Every subscription, every like, is a vote for resilience. And now, I want to hear from you. This is the most important part. I want you to go to the comments and tell me about the place, the moment, or the memory that you needed to reclaim. What was your willows? What was the site of your greatest pain? And how did you, or how are you working to, transform it into a source of your power? Share your story of reclamation below. I promise you, I read every single comment. Your stories are the blueprints that show us all how to rebuild. Thank you for being here, for witnessing my story. Remember, even when your world feels like it's been demolished, you are standing on a fresh construction site. You are the architect. Go build your empire. Love you all. Yo Mia. See you in the next story.